human beings have spent centuries trying to define God. Every culture, every religion, and every spiritual tradition has attempted to capture the essence of the divine. But the truth is, God cannot be contained within any single definition. When we try to explain God in human terms, we shrink something infinite into something small, something beyond limits into something confined. Our minds, shaped by time, space, and human experience, struggle to grasp a reality that transcends all boundaries. Many people imagine God as a being separate from them. A distant ruler, a powerful force watching over the world, deciding when to intervene. But this view is limiting. God is not an old man in the sky, nor a judge handing out rewards and punishments. God is not an external force that exists apart from us. Instead, God is an all-encompassing presence, an ocean of intelligence and love. And we, as human beings, are not separate from that divine reality. We are not separate from God. The divine is not something we need to reach. It is something we must remember. According to A Course in Miracles, there are only two fundamental forces in reality: love and fear. Love is the absolute truth. It is what everything is made of, the foundation of existence itself. Fear, on the other hand, is not real in the same way. Fear is just the absence of love, just as darkness is nothing but the absence of light. Fear has no true power of its own. It only exists when we forget love. We experience fear when we believe we are separate. Separate from each other, separate from the world, separate from God. We think we are alone in an indifferent or even hostile universe, and from this false belief, fear arises. But fear does not need to be fought or conquered. Instead, it simply needs to be replaced with love. When love enters any situation, fear disappears. We do not need to analyze our fears endlessly or try to overcome them by force. The moment we bring love into our perspective, fear dissolves. Yet, from childhood, we are taught something very different. We are raised in a world that tells us life is a struggle between opposing forces: good and evil, love and hate, peace and war. We are conditioned to believe in a God who is separate from us, who demands our devotion, who tests us and determines if we are worthy. We are told that something within us is broken, that we must earn love, that we must prove ourselves to be good enough for divine acceptance. But this is the greatest misunderstanding of all. The idea that we are separate from God is the root of human suffering. The divine is not something outside of us. It is not something to be earned or achieved. It is already within us. We are not separate from love. We are made of love. One of humanity's greatest mistakes has been projecting its own flaws onto God. Instead of recognizing God as an infinite force of love, intelligence, and creation, people have imagined God as a reflection of their own fears, their own judgments, and their own limitations. When people are angry and vengeful, they imagine God must be angry and vengeful. When they see the world as cruel, they assume God must be a punishing force. Religious doctrines have been built around this false perception. Many have taught that God rewards some people while punishing others, that God favors certain groups and rejects others. That divine love is conditional and dependent on human behavior. But all of these beliefs are distortions. They reduce the divine to a human concept, confining God within the limits of our own flawed thinking. God does not belong to any one religion, any one nation, or any one group of people. God is universal. God is not a figure sitting in judgment. God is not a ruler deciding who is worthy. God is love itself, boundless, infinite, and ever-present. A Course in Miracles describes human beings as ideas in the mind of God. This means we are not separate beings disconnected from our source. Instead, we are extensions of divine thought, created as part of the infinite consciousness of love. The belief that we are separate from God is the ultimate illusion. Think of a wave in the ocean. It appears for a moment, forming its own shape, moving in its own way. But it is never separate from the ocean itself. The wave rises, it falls, and it returns to the whole. So it is with us. We may experience individuality, but we are never truly apart from the divine. When we forget this, we suffer. When we remember, we find peace. When people believe in separation, they live in fear. They see the world as dangerous and uncertain. They see others as enemies or competitors instead of companions. They treat life as a battle instead of an experience to embrace. But all of this is an illusion. The truth is that we are not separate from God, and we are not separate from one another. Every moment we have a choice between two ways of thinking. The thought system of love or the thought system of fear. When we choose love, we align ourselves with the divine. We recognize that we are connected to everything, that we are safe, that every experience is an opportunity to grow. The thought system of love creates peace, forgiveness, joy, and compassion. It helps us see the divine in ourselves and in others. When we operate from love, we meet challenges with openness instead of resistance. We live with trust instead of anxiety. But when we choose fear, we align ourselves with the ego. Fear convinces us that we are alone, that we must fight to survive, that we are unworthy and unloved. Fear breeds guilt, anger, and suffering. It keeps us trapped in cycles of pain, making us believe we are powerless and separate from the divine. Much of the world operates under the thought system of fear. Wars, greed, inequality, and injustice all come from the belief in separation. When people believe they are separate from one another, they act selfishly, harming others to protect themselves. But these actions do not reflect reality. They reflect a world built on illusion. To wake up from this illusion is to recognize that love is the only reality. Everything else is a distortion. Hatred is just a cry for love. Anger is a reaction to pain. When we look at the world through the lens of love, we see past the illusions. We no longer react with fear, but with understanding. Our perception creates our experience. If we see the world as cruel, we will find cruelty everywhere. If we see the world as loving, we will see love all around us. This is not because the world itself changes, but because we begin to see it clearly without the distortions of fear. A Course in Miracles teaches that miracles are simply shifts in perception. A miracle happens when we choose love over fear. It is not a supernatural event. It is a natural transformation that occurs when we align ourselves with divine truth. This means that any situation can be healed by choosing to see it differently. An enemy can be seen as a lost brother or sister. A painful experience can be seen as an opportunity for growth. No situation is beyond healing because love is always present, waiting to be remembered. If love is the only true reality, then our purpose in life is to align with it in every moment. This is not just a theory, it is something we must practice every day. It means choosing to forgive instead of holding on to resentment. It means seeing the innocence in others instead of judging them. It means offering kindness instead of reacting defensively. It means trusting that everything in life is guiding us toward greater awareness. This is not always easy. The world constantly pushes us toward fear, toward defensiveness, toward judgment, toward separation. But every time we choose love instead, we reclaim our divine nature. Each day, we must consciously remind ourselves of this truth. Whether through prayer, meditation, or simple reflection, we must return to the awareness that we are love and our purpose is to extend love. We do not need to search for God outside of ourselves. We simply need to remember who we already are.